Hey everyone, my name is Lizzie and today we'll be talking about flavoring. So we're talking about flavoring from beginning to end of alcohol making. So that's before fermentation, during fermentation, and after fermentation. And when you make alcohol, you have to start with liquid. And you can either use water, you can use juice. I would not suggest milk or soft drinks because I've tried that and surprise, surprise, it didn't turn out well. However, I must admit that I had an amazing recipe that I did not write down and I know what I used. I used apple juice and I used some sugar and I've been trying to replicate that recipe ever since. However, it always comes up a little bit too sweet or not exactly the taste that I achieved, and I figured out what the problem was. It's the juice that I was buying. So the first recipe I used apple juice, no name, because who needs expensive apple juice when making alcohol? So this is the apple juice that I used, the no name. And I thought to myself that if I just buy apple juice again, it will replicate the flavor. However, not all apple juices are created equal. The other apple juice that I've been using have been from Walmart, and there's a little difference in taste, and it shows at the beginning if I just drink the juice by itself and at the end of the fermentation. If you use apple juice, you're more likely to make cider. However, you can also make wine with apple juice. It really depends on the definition of cider versus wine. Both of them intertwine. The main difference in cider is that it has the fizz. Both of them have roughly the same characteristics. And I've been using the Walmart apple juice for a while now. However, I'm gonna revert back to use this no-name apple juice and see if I can replicate that specific taste that I had once. So you gotta make sure that your juice is the same. You gotta make sure that the sugar you add is the same, and that's the second component of flavoring. It's the sugar that you add. So I've added white sugar versus brown sugar, and the yeast tends to have easier time eating white sugar because brown sugar, contrarily to the white sugar, brown sugar has more complex molecules, and therefore the yeast has a harder time eating the brown sugar, and because of this there might be more brown sugar left over at the end of your fermentation process compared to white sugar. If, however, you want to go left field and make mead, for example, you can use honey instead of using sugar. And when you eat honey compared to sugar, just like that, you just eat honey or sugar, you'll notice the difference. And these are the same types of differences that you'll notice when you're home brewing with honey versus with sugar. In both cases, the honey molecules and the sugar molecules are eaten by the yeast. Therefore, the flavor won't be as strong. However, there will still be that slight difference when using one versus the other. Now, so I have a few batches of beer under my belt, and I've learned that hops do influence flavor as well. It makes it bitter. And just by adding a few, you do not have to add a lot of hops, and a little bit of hops goes a long way in the bitterness of your beer. And I've also learned that it's a preservation agent. So let me know in the comments below if you use hops to preserve your alcohol. That was before fermentation when you're mixing all the ingredients together. However, during fermentation, we have other factors that influence the flavor, and this includes heat. So whether you're in a heat wave or you're in an ice cold environment, the alcohol will be influenced based on the temperature of the room. And ideally, the alcohol temperature or the wash temperature should be at 26 degrees Celsius. So that's inside the jar. If outside the jar is hot, you gotta make sure that within the jar, you're at the optimal 26 or roughly around 26 degrees Celsius. However, if the jar gets too hot, there might be chances of having off flavors because it stresses the yeast. And when the yeast is stressed, it tends to yield to off flavors because it's not in a favorable environment. Something else that stresses the yeast is having too much sugar. And when there's too much sugar, the yeast don't know what to do. It's like when you have too much work, you get stressed, and there's just an overwhelming amount of job to do. In the case of the yeast, the job is to eat the sugar, and it just creates off flavors. Therefore, a solution to having stressed yeast is to add more water inside your batch, or either to cool off the jar a bit by putting it in a less hot temperature. However, we want to make sure that it's not in a cold temperature, so do not put it in the fridge, not in the freezer, or do not put it in a dark cabinet in the corner of your kitchen because this affects the yeast negatively as well. The yeast will just become dormant and seep to the bottom of the jar, sleep and not eat the yeast that is present. So the yeast are little picky creatures, and we want to make sure that they're in that perfect range of temperature that makes them comfortable and makes them eat the sugar that's present to create alcohol. And the fourth aspect that influences flavor is the length of the fermentation. We have batches that finish after 1 week, after 2 weeks, after 3 weeks, and you can leave it as long as you'd like if you want the flavors to blend together, if you want them to age. However, the main way to find out if your alcohol is done is with a hydrometer. Hydrometer here, and this unit of measurement has 3 scales. And we see that it starts off with white, then blue, so there's different colors. And your batch should start off at roughly the orange or the green line here when you put it in a cylinder. So you pour your liquid in, and then you drop your hydrometer in, and it should float around this area. And this measures the amount of sugar present inside your liquid. So the longer that the liquid is with the yeast, the more sugar the yeast is going to eat, and the sugar is going to be transformed into alcohol. Therefore, the amount of sugar inside your liquid will decrease. The hydrometer throughout the days will go lower and lower and lower up to this point, 0.990 to 1.000, and that means that there is no more sugar left to eat by the yeast. And once there's no more sugar left to eat by the yeast, that means that the fermentation is done. And if you found that there's not much alcohol inside your batch, you can always add more sugar and let the leftover yeast eat the new sugar, and that will create a little bit more alcohol. However, you cannot add an unlimited amount of sugar, because after a certain percentage, let's say 20%, there can no longer be any more alcohol produced inside your batch. So depending on the yeast package will lead you up to a maximum percentage, and usually it's 15 to 20. And even if you add 3 packs, it's not going to increase your alcohol by 3 times. In order to increase your alcohol from 15, 20, all the way up to 40 or to 80% alcohol even, we're going to need a still. It's a machine that helps you distill your alcohol and purify it, so it removes all the excess, so all the yeast, all the unwanted elements, and just leaves pure alcohol inside your batch. Going back to flavoring, if your fermentation is not done, and let's say that the hydrometer was not at 0.990 to 1.00, but it was a little bit higher inside the cylinder, just to remind you, let's say it's roughly around here. So instead of being all the way down here, let's say it's still here. That means that there's still potential sugar to eat. You can still bottle your alcohol and you can still drink it if that's the preferred taste that you like. If you prefer your alcohol on the sweeter side, you can bottle it up, and that will affect the flavor because it won't be as strong. The alcohol level won't be as strong, and there will be more sugar present inside your alcohol. And once you wait for it to reach 1.00 to 0.990, so when the hydrometer is completely at the bottom of the cylinder, you can drink it. However, you can always age it, and you can age it in oak barrels, oak chips, and this will affect the flavors because it will have a more aged flavor the longer you wait. And as they say, wine gets better with time. Therefore, the longer you leave it to be, the better flavors will impart in it. However, this does not necessarily apply to beer. Beer, you can leave it longer. However, it's not necessarily going to be better with time. The taste is just going to change. Since we're talking about flavor, I brought a few batches here made by my students just to taste them, and let's see what it entails. So we have one made with cranberry juice. I had already opened it, and this is the one that's imitating red wine, so it has yet to be cleared. And I put some in the shot glass here, and when I go for a taste, so I do taste that it's a little on the sweeter side, and there is more sugar to be eaten. However, I do taste a little bit of alcohol, and it's fine to drink and bottle up as it is. Now, going to another batch, we also have a batch of cider. This was made with apple juice. We have the cider right here. It's a different batch, and I will taste it as well to see if it tastes like it's ready to bottle. I believe it is. Oh. Yeah, it doesn't taste that sweet. The other one was definitely sweeter. And when it comes to the last one, the beer, this one I was a little bit hesitant because when it was made initially, there wasn't enough sugar. And how do we know it's beer? You'll see the hops at the bottom. This should be a little bit more bitter. Yeah, it smells like beer. And see this little nasty stuff there? That's what the hops look like. Okay, honestly, I'm kind of scared to taste this because I had in the past when it was not fermenting actually, because there was yeast but there was no sugar. So here we go. I've added a little sugar and let's see if it tastes more like beer now. It's been fermenting for roughly a week. Put it in the shot glass. It's pretty light. So the color is there. Yeah, it's super light. It's like a little pale ale. All these batches have been made by my classes. And if you'd like tips and tricks on how to make beer, wine, cider, book a class. The link is in the description below. And if you found this video valuable, share it with a friend. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.